So you want to learn Nepali? Well, you've come to the right place, because so do I. Let's do it together. Swagat sa baila yo mero naya YouTube channel ho. Welcome everybody. This is my new YouTube channel. I've been learning Nepali for about a year and a half now, and English is my native language. But as I've learned, I haven't really found a solid, comprehensive, complete source, especially not from the point of view of a native English speaker. So I decided to start recording a series of videos to share what I've learned. Now, a little disclaimer, I'm not fluent in Nepali. I'm also not that smart, so mistakes are kind of inevitable. Also, I speak Nepali with an American accent. I try my best, but my pronunciation is not perfect. Alright, disclaimer out of the way, let's start learning. In this video, we will discuss the consonants of the Nepali alphabet. In subsequent videos, we will discuss vowels and how letters come together to form words. Something that helped me a lot when I first started to learn the alphabet was making flashcards. So as we go through each video, feel free to pause and make them as we go. Nepali letters can be a little tricky when you first start, so maybe use a pencil and have an eraser handy. Also, I'll have a link in the description so you guys can access the slides I've created for this video. Alright, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. So the Nepali alphabet has technically 33 consonants, although if you look up the alphabet online, or even in most textbooks, there will often be 36 letters included that make up the consonants. And that's because the last three consonants are actually called consonant conjuncts, or consonant clusters, which don't worry, we'll talk about this later. But they are just really commonly used in the spelling of Nepali words, so they're typically included. Nepali letters are written in Devanagari script, a descendant of Brahmi script. On the top left of the screen, you will see the letter written in the Devanagari, and below it I've written the romanized pronunciation. You'll also see that to the right of the box with ka, there's another box that'll pop up where I'll write it for you so you can see how I write it. This letter is pronounced ka. An important thing to understand about the Nepali alphabet is that all consonants by themselves end in that sound. So anytime you see the romanized pronunciation below a letter, it will end with a single letter A to denote that sound. This is very important as you go on to read Nepali. More on that later when we get into vowels. So ka is a velar plosive, which is just the IPA or International Phonetics Alphabet way of describing it. Now, I've also included a reference sheet in the description that defines all the terms used by the IPA, if you're into that. Some of the other letters I'll reference these terms for, but for this one, this letter is pretty simple. Basically, it's the same as our letter K or the hard C sound in English. Ka as in come. Top right, we have our examples of ka in Nepali words, kalam, which means pen, and kucho, which means broom. Now our next letter is ka. This is the aspirated version of ka, our first letter. Yes, the first two letters are very similar. The difference between ka and ka is all in the aspiration. What, you may ask, is aspiration?
Be careful not to choke on your aspirations, Director.
Well, no, not quite that. The technical definition of aspiration is the action or process of drawing breath. So when used in connection with sounds and pronunciation, it means air is released when you pronounce sounds. Most consonant sounds in the English language are aspirated. It happens naturally, without us even thinking about it. For example, the word top. The T at the beginning of the word sounds exploded. Air comes out. Try to say it without air coming out for the T. T, t, as opposed to t. It's kind of unnatural for us to try to say that sound without the air coming out, without the aspiration. To visualize this even further, imagine holding a piece of paper in front of your mouth as you speak. Now try to pronounce the first letter of the Nepali alphabet, ka. But don't let the paper move with the air that comes out of your mouth. If air comes out and moves the paper, odds are you're aspirating that sound. Now try the second letter, ka. Air should come out and move the paper. Got it? So anytime I romanize the pronunciation of an aspirated sound, I always use the letter H. Again, the example is ka as in come, but it's aspirated. Examples of ka in Nepali words are kana, which means food, and khel, which means game. Now you'll notice a slight variation in the printed letter on the left and how I write ka, but that's alright. You'll see them both ways. Oftentimes I see them a little bit more how I've written it, and it's just more comfortable for me how I prefer to write it. As you go on to read more and more Nepali, you'll notice that different people write certain letters different ways, and also it'll change a little bit depending on the font chosen as well, just like English. The next letter is ga, ga as in gum. This is a velar plosive sound as well. Some examples of ga in Nepali words are gardanu, which is a verb that means to do, and geet, which means song. The next letter is ga, ga as in gum, but it's aspirated. This is a velar plosive sound as well. Examples of ga in Nepali words are ganta and gar. Ganta meaning hour, the telling time kind of hour, and gar meaning house or home. The next letter is nga, which is a velar nasal sound. It's a similar sound to the ng in sing. This letter never occurs at the beginning of words. It is oftentimes paired with ga, the unaspirated ga, to make that ng sound at the end of sing or other ing words. An example of nga is rang, which means color. I'll again draw attention to how I romanize my Nepali words. Notice how it's not pronounced rang, the English word rang. That's because every time I write a single letter A, it's to denote that sound, so it's pronounced rang. The next letter is tsa. Now this is a sound we don't really have in English. Even though we'd write it with CHA, we wouldn't actually pronounce it like cha. Imagine trying to say ta, sa, and cha all at the same time, and you sort of get tsa. A more accurate way to understand this sound is considering the IPA and getting a little technical. Notice it's an alveolar affricate sound. We'll focus in on the alveolar word. The alveolar ridge is an area on the roof of your mouth just behind the upper teeth. Alveolar consonants are pronounced when you have the tongue against or close to this area. So try putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth behind your front teeth and then say cha. It should come out sounding like tsa. So examples of tsa in Nepali words is tsia, which means tea, which by the way is delicious. Go try some if you haven't already. And we also have here tsamo, which is uncooked rice. Next we have tsa, the aspirated tsa. Same as the previous letter, but it's aspirated. The letter tsa by itself is actually how you spell the number 6. And also we have chora, which means son, as in your child's son. Tsa. The next letter is z, as in jump. It almost sounds like there's a z in there, but it's an alveolar sound. So remember where your tongue goes, roof of the mouth behind the front teeth. Examples of z are jungle, which means jungle, pretty similar there. And the next example is zivan, which means life. The next letter is z, the same letter as before but aspirated. You'll see that there's 2 letters here. That's because the one on the right is a variant of z that isn't really used anymore, but it's good to know in case it pops up somewhere. Typically, you'll only see the first box, the one on the left. Examples of z are juto, which means liar, and jola, which means bag. Next we have nya. This isn't a very common letter. It's often used in formal or archaic words. Although it's technically nya, usually if people come across it, they just pronounce it like na, as in nut. Now we get to the retroflex sounds.
Weird flex, but okay.
A retroflex sound is when you put the tip of your tongue on the roof of your mouth as you make the sound. This kind of makes it sound like a classic Indian accent. So the letter here is ta. Examples of ta are tarda, which means far, and topi, which means hat. Next we have ta. A reminder that although I have romanized it as tha, it's not actually the English th sound, th, as in thank you. It's the same as the previous letter, ta, a retroflex ta, but it's aspirated, so air comes out, ta. Examples of ta are town, which means place, as in a location, and tulo, which means big. Now we have da, a retroflex d sound, da as in done. An example of da is dar, which means fear. After da, we have da, the aspirated version of the previous letter. Examples of da are dilo and doka. Dilo means slow, and doka means door. The next letter is na. Technically, it's both nasal and retroflex, but this letter is used in more formal or older words, so when people read it, usually they just pronounce it like na, as in nut, a normal N sound. Next we have ta, as in tug. Examples of ta are tapai, which is the high respect form of you, and tarakari, which means vegetable. After ta is ta, the aspirated version of our previous letter. It is still ta as in tug, but it's an aspirated sound. And no, it is not like tha, like thank you, it's ta. Examples of ta are talnu, which is a verb meaning to begin, and tuknu, another verb which means to spit. After ta comes da, da as in dumb. This is pretty much the same sound as our letter D, but it's not aspirated. Examples of da are din, which means day, and dui, which means the number 2. The next letter is da. Da as in dumb again, basically the same as the previous letter, but aspirated. Examples of da are dhanyabad, which means thank you, and dhere, which means very. And next we have na. Technically a textbook called it nasal, but don't worry about all that. Just understand that it's the same as our English na sound. Na as in nut. Examples of na in Nepali words are namaste, that's a good one to know, and also noon, which means salt. After na is pa, pa as in puff. Examples of pa are pabitra, which means holy, and pailo, which means first. After pa is fa, which although I have it written as fa, as in fun, that's only because our English letter F is the closest sound to fa. This is an aspirated pa sound. We make the F sound with our teeth and lips, but to correctly pronounce this Nepali consonant, fa, the sound is made with the lips only, and air that blows through the lips. Kinda imagine blowing out a candle and you get that little sound. So try to train your brain that it's not just the F sound from our English alphabet, but it's the fa sound made with air blowing through the lips. Examples of fa are feri, which means again, and ful, which means flower. Next is ba as in bug. Examples of ba are balio and buba. Balio means strong and buba means father. After ba is va, similar to fa, as in it's a bilabial sound, so it's made by blowing air out of the lips. This results in it sounding almost like the letter V combined with the letter B. or sometimes depending on the accent or who's speaking, a Nepali person will pronounce one word having it sound like a B, and another person will pronounce that same word, but the V sound will sound like a V. You will develop your accent the more you hear native Nepali speakers talk and read. Examples of V are Vasa, which means language, and Veda, which means sheep. Ma is our next letter. Ma as in Monday. Some textbooks classify it as nasal, but don't worry about that. It's the same as our English ma sound. Examples of ma are muk, which means mouth, and maya, which means love. Next letter is ya, as in yummy. Examples of ya in Nepali words is yatra, which means trip or journey, and yo, which means this. After ya is ra, ra as in run. Typically this is a rolled R sound. Examples of ra are hratri, meaning night, and hruk, meaning tree. The next letter is la, as in luck. Examples of la are luga, which means clothes, and leknu, which is a verb that means to write. After la is wa-va-ba letter. This is a little bit of a tricky letter. It changes depending on the word. If the wa is at the beginning of the word, it is usually pronounced as a ba or va sound. Sometimes it also depends on accent or preference. An example of this is pabitra. I've heard Nepali speakers pronounce it both pabitra and pavitra. So this is something you'll just have to learn as you go. So our next letter is sa, as in some, and as you're going to see, the next few letters sound exactly the same. They all sound like sa. The reason they're written differently is for historical reasons, and some purists will say that this version of sa should be pronounced sha, and another version we'll look at pronounced a different way, but when you hear most people read or speak, they'll pronounce all of these following letters the same way as sa, like our English S letter. Examples of sa in Nepali words are Sonibar, which means Saturday, and Sakti, which means power. Our next letter, again we have sa, sa as in some. I don't have any examples of this letter, but you'll see it sometimes. And then next we have another sa, as in some. Examples of this sa are Satya, which means truth, and Sano, which means small. So our next letter is ha, as in hug. Oftentimes if ha is in the middle of a word, or even at the end, it's barely pronounced. But if it's at the beginning, they pronounce it pretty much all the time. Examples of ha in Nepali words are hapta, which means week, and hati, which means elephant. So our last three letters aren't actually even consonants in the Nepali alphabet. They're actually called consonant conjuncts, which are basically two consonants combined together to form like a dual sound. The reason that these three are often included in the Nepali alphabet, like I mentioned before, is that they're very commonly used. So our first one of these has actually two different pronunciations. It depends if it's at the beginning of the word or in the middle of the word, or end. The first pronunciation, if it's at the beginning, is chia. The example of this, as you can see in the top right box, is chiamata, which means ability or capacity. But if it's in the middle of a word or the end, it's pronounced a little differently. For example, laksyan. It's got that K-S-Y-A sound. Kasya, laksya, laksyan. And laksyan means symptom. Next we have tra, T-R-A. Tra as in trump. And tra, again, is a consonant conjunct. It's not necessarily a consonant in itself. I don't have any examples of this one used, but you'll see it pretty often used in Nepali words. And then finally we have our last consonant conjunct, gya, which I couldn't think of really any English words that have this sound in it, so it's just the G-Y-A combination, gya. So there you have it. There's the Nepali alphabet as far as consonants go. In our next video, we're going to talk about vowels, and how vowels combine with different consonants to create different sounds. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. फेरि बताउँला
किन टाइम छैन तिम्रो टाइम छैन जहिले पनि टाइम छैन किन टाइम छैन बुझ्न पनि गाह्रो बोल्न पनि छाडो If I get you back today you will love me